Back everybody to C&D's Live. Today we're going to talk about ancient Egypt. First off, we're going to talk about their geography.
Ancient Egypt was located in northeastern Africa and had four clear geographical zones: the Delta, the Western Desert, the Eastern Desert, and the Nile Valley. Each of these zones had their own natural environment and their own role in ancient Egypt. Cities could only flourish in the Nile Delta, the Nile Valley, or the desert oasis, where people had access to water, land, and key resources.
The ancient Egyptians, who were always keen observers of nature, often associated the Nile Valley with life and abundance and the neighboring deserts with death and chaos. Ancient Egypt is still called Egypt in the present day. Ancient Egypt had two close bodies of water. They had the Nile, the longest river in the world, and the Red Sea. The Nile provided fresh water for drinking and farming, and the Red Sea provided salt water for fishing. Other civilizations near the ancient Egypt is the Babylons, the Hittites, and the Mitanese.
Also, ancient Egypt's writing was very unique.
The language was a Semitic language related to the Arabic and the Hebrew. They also communicated with a written language called the Egyptian hieroglyphics, which was elaborate from the pictographic writing. Ancient Egypt's writing was hieroglyphics, which means scared engravings in Greek.
We can read Egyptian writing, but it is very difficult, and even the people who can read it have a very hard time. Most likely, they developed writing for trade so they can convey info about goods, prices, and purchases from one point to another. Only Egyptians used writing from hieroglyphics.
Now, let's talk about when they emerged, their peak and fall.
Egypt is a modern-day country that was one of the first regions of the world to be a cradle of civilization. Civilization first emerged in the northeast corner of Africa along the 4,200-mile-long Nile River. Over 5,000 years ago, in 3150 BC, Menes united Upper and Lower Egypt and founded the first dynasty of Egypt. Ancient Egypt was at its height during the span from 1550 to 1070 BCE, and it was around from 3150 to 30 BC. It finally fell in 30 BC. Ancient Egypt's art was also super fascinating, so we should talk about that next.
I agree, man. Let's go. Ancient Egypt art was magical. Whether in the form of painting, sculpture, carving, or script, art had the power to maintain universal order and grant immortal life by appealing to various gods to act on behalf of people, both in life and in death. Art was everywhere. Ancient Egypt art included paintings, sculptures, agriculture, and other forms of art, such as drawings on papyrus created by 3000 BC, created between 3000 BC and 100 AD.
Now let's transition into their architecture and literature, because that was a big part of their civilization. Ancient Egypt's architecture was a big aspect of their civilization, reflecting their relationship with the land and gods. It is characterized by monumental structures like temples and pyramids, showcasing the Egyptians' belief in an eternal afterlife, theocratic principles, and their religious dogma. We learned that they believed that their art was magical and had the power to maintain universal order and grant immortal life by appealing to various gods to act on behalf of people in both life and in death.
Yeah, that's actually kind of crazy. I'm not gonna lie.
That's mad weird, bro.
It's weird. It's kind of interesting, though. I would say.
Facts.
I'd say. But anyways, the government was pretty tough. I'm not gonna lie.
Ancient Egypt was a theocratic monarchy. The ruler of ancient Egypt was called a pharaoh. Pharaohs were looked upon as more than rulers. They were gods, chosen to lead the people and maintain order, and provide an important link between the Egyptian people and their gods. A theocratic monarchy is a king that rules by a mandate from the gods, was usually seen as a mediator between human and the divine. Ancient Egypt's legal system was based on common sense.
The Egyptians' goddess, Madat, was the goddess of justice. Basically, the law followed the teachings of Madat according to the priests about what was right and wrong. No remains of written laws have been found.
So, I mean, that's basically, insane. They thought, gods just ran everything.
That is crazy. They have really, no other beliefs except God's. It's crazy.
But really, their slavery is, what really was interesting.
Slaves were a big part of the labor workforce in ancient Egypt. Those who worked as house servants took care of cooking, cleaning, gardening, and even the children. Another job slaves had were entertainment. Their cities were not built by slaves, but conscripted workers. Slaves in Egypt, as in ancient Greece and Rome, came in all colors. That was super cool, man, but the rise and fall was really interesting, so let's talk about that next.
The ancient Egyptians rose from the natural resources they had all around them. During the 18th dynasty, Egypt restored its control over Nubia and began military campaigns in Palestine, clashing with other powers in the area, such as the Medians and the Hittites. The country went on to establish the world's first great empire, stretching from Nubia to the Euphrates River in Asia and lasting as a leading economy. Ancient Egypt's cultural influence throughout the North Africa and parts of the Levant until it was conquered by Macedonians in 332 BCE. 670 BC, the Assyrians invade and conquer Egypt. 525 BCE, the Persian Empire conquers and rules Egypt. 332 BC, Alexander the Great conquers Egypt. Ancient Egypt had ground, land, and resources, so the geographic location was not the reason they got conquered.
Even though ancient Egypt didn't have actual cash, they had a very complex economy. Ancient Egypt was a rich country in many natural resources, but was not self-sufficient and had to rely on necessary goods and luxury. Egypt's main products of trade were grain, gold, linen, papyrus, glass, and stone objects. Geography affects trade because in some places you have other resources that people don't have, so they will want to trade for the items they don't have. Egyptian society was structured like a pyramid. At the top were the goods, such as Ra, Osiris, and Isis. At the bottom there were slaves and peasants, and anyone else was in between. Egyptians believed that the gods controlled the universe, therefore it was important to keep them happy. They could make the Nile overflow, cause famine, or even bring death.
Enough of talking. Let me talk about the beliefs now. Gods and goddesses were all-consuming to the ancient Egyptians. They filled everything. The ancient Egyptians were polytheistic, believing in more than one god. And they are thought to have had thousands of gods and goddesses. They dictated how people lived their lives, how they treated other people, how they farmed and worked. In all their beliefs about afterlife, many ancient Egyptians believed that there was a place when they died called the Duat. We translate this word as underworld or afterlife. To get to the afterlife, a deceased person's spirit had to travel on a long, challenging journey. Hey D, what contributions did ancient Egypt have on our world today?
Well, they were the first to introduce mummification, medicine, agriculture, fermentation, engineering, and agriculture. The ancient Egypts were pioneers in astronomy. Their exercise played an important role in determining the annual flooding of the Nile and aligning the pyramids toward the pole star for 7,000 years. Egypt has inspired artists, writers, scientists, and
Intellectuals.
Egypt has inspired artists, writers, scientists, and intellectuals. The ancient Egyptians left behind a legacy of impressive monuments such as pyramids and temples and invented hieroglyphics writing. It's a fantastic civilization to discover. But hey, C, what about their technology?
5 inventions we still use today from ancient Egypt is papyrus and possibly paper, ink, makeup, toothpaste, and hair gel. Ancient Egypt used a lunar calendar exclusively, until later switched to the solar calendar. Since the crops needed water to grow, the ancient Egyptians also invented a system of canals that they dug to irrigate their crops. Besides, they built gates into these canals to control the flow of the water and built reservoirs to hold water supplies in case of drought. In 3001 BC, considered the pre-dynastic and early dynastic architecture regime, Egyptian architecture witnessed its origin in the form of hieroglyphics, mastabas, and obelisks, which essentially project the relationship of people with the divine. This form of architecture primarily underlines the principles of ancient Egyptian culture and encompassing features like symmetry, balance, and grandeur. The idea of including pyramids in Egyptian architecture, which is now a part of history and culture, came into being in the old kingdoms of Egypt. Yo, D, this is our last topic, so let's make it lit.
Yes, sir. The Old Kingdom of Egypt occurred from 2650 to 2180 BCE. The notable accomplishments of this period are because of the strong leadership of the pharaohs, Khafre, Khufu, and the Menkaure. The period of the New Kingdom was the time of Egypt's empire when trade was most lucrative and contributed to the wealth necessary to build monuments like the Temple of Karnak, the Colosseum Memnon, and the Moteri Temple of Hatshepsut. The New Kingdom is a period covering the 18th, 19th, and 20th dynasty of Egypt. The New Kingdom ended when the priests of Amnon grew strong enough to assert their power at the Thebes and divide the country between the rule and the pharaohs at the city of Ramesses. The cause was because the trade was booming and they were getting resources, a lot of resources.
Thanks for watching C&D Live. We'll catch you next time talking about ancient Rome. Peace out, y'all.
All right.